Okay, great. We'll get started. So welcome. My name is Natalie Dean. I am an assistant professor in the Department of Biostatistics and Bioinformatics at Emory University's Rollins School of Public Health. I'm also a member of the 2022 class of the COPSS Leadership Academy. So as a little background, COPSS is the Committee of Presidents of Statistical Societies. It's made up of various statistical societies, ASA, ENAR, WENAR, IMS, the Statistical Societies of Canada, along with many friends of societies from across the globe. COPSS bestows many awards each year, including the new COPSS Leadership Academy, which was recently renamed to the COPSS Emerging Leader Award. And the purpose of this award is to recognize early career statistical scientists who show evidence of and potential for leadership. It also provides a mechanism for us to share our vision of leadership with the field. From this emerges this webinar series, which is co-organized by COPSS and our wonderful partners at the National Institute of Statistical Societies. And these webinars are an opportunity to feature leaders throughout the discipline, invite them to tell their leadership stories and share their insights. And it's also an opportunity to celebrate statisticians and data scientists who have achieved great things and who have inspired others in many different ways. So for the first, this inaugural webinar, the topic of today is leadership in academia. So leaders in higher education are driven by a desire to make a difference through teaching, research, and writing. But the broader responsibilities of these leaders, like our department chairs, deans, provosts, even presidents, requires different types of skills, managerial skills, and a vision for the path ahead. We're very fortunate today to have two of our very own statisticians who have risen to high ranks within academia. If you guys would turn your cameras on, great, thank you. So we'll start off with Professor Sally Morton. She's Executive Vice President of the Knowledge Enterprise at Arizona State University, which is responsible for the university's research and economic development ecosystem. She's also professor in the School of Mathematical and Statistical Sciences. Before arriving at ASU, she was Dean of the College of Science at Virginia Tech, and before that, department chair, and held leadership positions at RTI and Branch. She's going to take us through that journey in a few minutes. She was also ASA president in 2009. She's internationally recognized in the use of statistics and data science to help patients, their families, and providers make better healthcare decisions. And I could keep going, but we'd be here all day. So we'll let them tell a little bit more about their experiences. Next, we have Professor Ron Brookmeyer. Professor Brookmeyer is Dean of the UCLA Fielding School of Public Health and a distinguished professor of biostatistics. Before arriving at UCLA, he had a long career at Johns Hopkins, and Professor Brookmeyer has received many awards. He's a member of the National Academy of Medicine and winner of the American Public Health Association Spiegelman Award for significant contributions to health statistics. He's internationally recognized for his work on many topics, including HIV/AIDS, Alzheimer's, and more. And we're so pleased to have them both here with us. So the structure of today's event is as follows. Each of our two panelists will have 10 minutes to talk about their leadership journey. And then I've prepared some questions for them. And finally, we'll open it up to the audience. So please use the Q&A function for questions. And what we'll do is I'll read the questions aloud. If you would like, please sign your name and affiliation at the end of your questions. We can also have some raising of the hand function. We'll see what we have time and capacity to manage. And we'd also encourage folks to tweet about what they are hearing. And if you do so, please use our hashtag #StatsLeadershipWebinar. So with that, we will get started with Professor Sally Morton. So Sally, let me get your slides up for you. Okay, good.
So thank you so much, Natalie. I'm delighted to be here with you and everyone on the webinar, and honored to be here with Ron Brookmeyer, longtime colleague and friend. So delighted to be here. So please go to the next slide. Wonderful. So when asked to describe one's journey, I usually think in terms of geography and space and time. And I feel a little bit out of place here because actually my career has had a part both in nonprofit organizations. I began my career at the RAND Corporation, where I was head of the RAND Statistics Group, and also spent time at RTI International in North Carolina before moving across the chasm. Down at the bottom there, you see a chasm between industry and academics. I actually think that chasm is narrowing, which I'm delighted to see. But I moved into academics when I became chair of biostatistics at the University of Pittsburgh, and then was a dean, as well as an institute director, and now lead research at ASU in Arizona. So you can see I'm trying to make my way back across the country. My research, as you heard, is really in health policy. I actually think as a leader, you lead by example. So maintaining some scholarly work is important in that journey. And I've tried to do that, though the time for that has narrowed and diminished over time, which is actually kind of a sadness for me in my career, but one gives up certain things in order to be able to do other things. So I really have pursued more of a leadership and administrative track in my career than a research one, though I have always tried to maintain some research. And I think that's just because of what I think I could give to the profession. So why don't we go on to the next slide? So in preparing for today's remarks, I thought a little bit about how did I make these decisions to move through these places in my career. I think that serendipity and luck always play a part. But for me, the common themes in my decision-making process is first, I'm always driven by mission. And down at the bottom of the slide, you can see the mission, the charter of ASU. We are a public university. We are defined by whom we include, not whom we exclude, and the success of our students. And our job, my job as head of research, is to advance research and discovery in public service and accountable to the communities that we serve. So I've always been mission-driven in where I choose to work and the contributions that I try to make. I'm an applied statistician. I apply statistics in service of health policy. And also about 5 to 7 years into my career, I thought to myself and realized that I could have more of an impact by supporting others' careers than as an individual researcher. And that's what I try to do as a service leader. I'm also a big believer in that a unit should not be the leader, and the unit itself, whether it's the RAND Statistics Group or the College of Science at Virginia Tech, there's a point where I've come and I've done what I think I can do as an individual, and it's time to move on. The job is done, time to move on. I think there are personal constraints in any journey, any career journey. We all have families, partners, children, other interests, and those combine in the decisions that we make. I can say it's been a lot of fun. The picture in the upper right is me canoeing on the Rappahannock River when I was dean of the College of Science. So I've gotten to do all kinds of interesting things over the course of my career. I actually find one of the most interesting things about my career too now in leading research at ASU is I get to learn about all different kinds of research. And I think as statisticians, we are particularly capable of doing that because that's what we learn to do. Sitting down with different scientists, asking them questions about the research that they're doing. How does the analysis fit in? So we're used to learning about new things. And I find that really, really exciting in my job. So I find the issues of leadership, to me, there are logistic challenges. How do you work with the resources that you have, the people that you have to solve a problem that you need to in a time-constrained, resource-constrained environment? I actually find those intellectual questions really, really important. I've also put one quote on the slide from Christopher Kuhn's, "Scientists simply can't be silent or else science truly will be silenced." This is from a 2017 op-ed that he wrote for Science magazine. I think we need to continue as statisticians and as scientists to speak up and advocate for good decisions to be made. So I think I'll close there, Natalie, and Thank you very much and looking forward to the discussion.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, Professor Brookmeyer, the floor is yours.
Great. Well, first, let me begin by expressing my thanks to the National Institute of Statistical Sciences and COPSS for sponsoring and hosting this webinar series. It really is a joy to be here with Sally and also with you, Natalie, and I want to recognize all your incredible contributions to communicating what's been going on with the COVID pandemic. You know, my leadership journey was not a straight line. When I started, initially I wanted to be an architect, but I realized I wasn't, you know, particularly artistic. So I thought about being an engineer and started in that, and I realized I wasn't particularly mechanical. That led me to mathematics, and ultimately I said, well, I want to do something more practical, and that led me to statistics. And, you know, I credit a lot with some incredible mentors that I had, and George Box comes to mind. I was a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin, and I remember him saying how he wasn't particularly good at mathematical proofs, but he solved problems, and that's what he was. He was a problem solver and looked for impact. And I said, well, yeah, you know, assess what you're good at and play to your strengths. And the fact that he said that really made a difference for me. You know, ultimately, I wanted to do something in health, and that led me to biostatistics. When I look back at the very beginnings, when I wanted to be an architect, that idea of building and designing does speak to big picture leadership. And then when I switched to engineering, it led me that practical aspect in me wanting to solve problems. And then in statistics, being a statistical collaborator, that's all about listening. It's all about bringing people together. My first academic job after graduate school was at Johns Hopkins University. And I was very fortunate to come into a spectacular culture there to start a career. When I was recruited to Johns Hopkins, the department chair who recruited me was Dr. Charles Rohde. I have the sad news to have learned this past week that Charles Rohde passed away. But he really promoted careers. He didn't micromanage, and he was extremely influential in my life. And about life lessons about how to make people feel good and how to build careers. And that really had a huge impact on me. The culture of coming together and camaraderie and building people up, and has been an example for me in how to lead. In the early 1980s, when I was beginning my career, AIDS started, HIV. I quickly began to take a leadership role, both in research and in modeling of that. I realized that as a statistician, you can be a leader on a global level, and really have huge impact. And that was really important life lesson about how we can really make as statisticians, a big difference. I started to work on curriculum at Johns Hopkins University and reinvent how we teach biostatistics, not only to biostatisticians, but to Master of Public Health students. And many of the principles that we developed there are carried on now by my colleagues there at Marie Diener West and John McGrady. That led to my interest in academic programs and ultimately developing curriculum. And that ultimately led to my appointment as the director of the Master of Public Health program at Johns Hopkins, one of the largest in the world. And how, you know, if you've seen one MPH student, you've seen one Master of Public Health student, and how when you build curricula, you have to be looking at a diverse student body. And the program didn't sit in one department, but it transcended departmental boundaries, and how then you begin to develop curricula that that speaks not to silos, but to very cross-disciplinary approach. You know, I never saw my career in a linear fashion. After being the director of the Master of Public Health program at Hopkins, I returned to teaching and research, and ultimately moved to UCLA, where I wanted to return to research and being a professor. Within a few years, an opportunity came for me to become the interim dean. And I did it because I felt I could make a difference, that I could bring people together, that I could change culture, and build careers. Because as leaders, that's ultimately what you do, build the careers of others. And within a year, I became the permanent dean. And one thing I do is I try never to forget what it's like to be a faculty member in an administrative role. And I try hard to stay very connected to our students. You know, whatever you do, I would say you always do it well and play to your strengths and find role models and how you can have a difference. Do where you can have the biggest impact.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, well, that's a great way to start our discussion. So for the next 20 minutes or so, we will go through some questions that I've prepared. So first, what is one thing about being a leader that has surprised you? And does anyone like to start? Ron, you've unmuted, or were you already unmuted?
Yeah, well, you know, I was thinking about that. You know, what surprised me, and I'll tell you what surprised me, is the unpredictable situations that I never would have imagined. And you know, within 1 month of being named the dean here at the UCLA Fielding School of Public Health, the COVID pandemic took off. Wow. We had to switch to remote teaching. And how do you do that? And not only that, public health was in the center of all this. And I was 1 month into the deanship, and then they asked me to lead the COVID response at UCLA. I had 2 full-time jobs, and you know, you just never know what's going to happen. At the University of California system, we just ended a teaching assistant and graduate student researcher strike that, you know, paralyzed a lot of the units here at the UC system, and really disrupted teaching. How do you pivot from that? How do you recognize the issues that teaching assistants were facing, as well as the students who are in classes and are trying to learn? And so what surprised me is you don't know what's going to happen, and it really takes resilience. It takes a calmness, a confidence, and always when you're dealing with difficult situations and issues and dealing with people, always showing respect and trying to move forward and do the best you can.
So I thought about this question too, and I wholeheartedly agree with what you've said, Ron. It is unpredictable situations such as COVID. But thinking about when I began as a leader, I became head of the RAND statistics group about 5 years into my career. And my initial thought was, well, if I just get this organized, there are policies and procedures, and we figure out how this all works, anybody can lead this. But I've come to the conclusion that that isn't actually true. Over time, I've seen that the leader, the person, really does matter. Not everyone has to lead in the same way, but having that trust, that communication, that respect that Ron referred to at the core of leadership really does matter. How is the community listened to? How values are shown? That really matters. During COVID, I had been a dean for 4 years, so I knew my college. I began every meeting and ended every meeting with your health, your family's health, and our community's health is what matters, and really trying to communicate very, very clearly. So I've come to the conclusion that people are all that matter. The people that you can recruit, developing them, retaining them, and people surprise you every time. You might think this person isn't, what are they doing? And then you start talking to them and understanding what their situation is. Maybe it's never been clear to them what they're supposed to do, or maybe they have a personal set of challenges that are going on right then that you need to listen to. So people are multifaceted. They're not just dealing with the job, they're dealing with all the other things in life around them. They're complex. So I've tried never to judge people too quickly and to try to give everyone a chance to prove themselves, because I've always been surprised. So I guess for me, again, going back to your question, I think the person who is the leader and what the core values are really matter, and that relationship with the people that they're leading, and then the people themselves. I run a big unit here. My budget is over $200 million. We've got buildings, we've got equipment, we've got all kinds of things, but at the core of it, the only thing that really matters are the people that I have and the people that I'm working with and for. They are at the core of what I do.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. People can surprise in all sorts of ways. Yeah, that's great. Okay. So the next question, and it's sort of, maybe I'll kick that over to you, Professor Morton. So, because it relates to what you just said about some of the things that what you're managing. I mean, what are some of the most important decisions you make as a leader in your organization, thinking about the types of decisions and challenges and sort of what's happening at that level of higher education?
Right. So I really like that you put forward this question, Natalie, and the group that prepared this, because it really places decision-making front and center for leaders. I think you have to be able to make decisions as a leader. The question is when and how. So I tend to be pretty impatient. So I've tried to learn which questions need to be made quickly and which can wait. Ron will know this. Sometimes things resolve themselves and you don't actually have to make a decision or use any political capital. So that's one thing to know. Decisions need to be made, but thinking about what the best timing is. Also, you don't need to make decisions by yourself. I tend to be, I work with a core set of people who are experts in their area. I take their advice. I do make the decisions and I own those decisions. You have to do that as a leader. It always said, when there's praise, get out of the way and let it reflect on your people. When there's criticism, get in front and defend your people. Also, one thing I've learned, at least in my experience, there's often not an optimal solution, and you may never know what it is. There's generally some local maxima. So you got to figure out when a decision needs to be made, make it, it's the best decision you've ever made, and move forward. I also think you need a structure around decisions. People should be able to understand how are you distributing resources. It should be clear. So we have a strategy, whether that's a strategic plan, we can debate whether that's a good thing to do or not, but people should understand how the decisions are made. If they don't like the decision, at least they understand it. And that goes a long way to maintaining trust, I think, with the people that you lead. So what decisions do I make? I make bets all day. That's what I do. And a lot of times they're big dollar bets, millions of dollars. I'm making bets on what investments, what equipment to buy, what people to hire, how to support people. I am making bets. And in my career, I bet on people. There are people that come, they have an idea, another person comes with the same idea. I will bet on the person every time because I know they will bring that idea to fruition. So at ASU, it's a place, our president uses the term disruptive innovation, which means we have to be really nimble, move quickly, which has been a bit of a challenge for me. That's one of the reasons I took the job, because I thought it would be fun to learn some new things. But again, for me, decisions, the type of decisions I'm making are investments in certain technologies, certain scientific areas, because my job is to support research. So a group of faculty comes forward, they have an idea, they need space, they need equipment, they need investment in bringing additional people to the university. I'm trying to move resources, influence others to be part of that bet, basically. But I'm placing bets all day. That's what I do.
Great. Yeah, betting on people. Professor Brookmeyer?
Yeah. As Sally was speaking right now, the phrase that caught me, which really resonated, was betting on people. And ultimately, a leadership position is working and dealing with people. And, when I think about what's the most important decision I make as a leader, it's the key hiring and of the key leadership positions in the organization. In a school, at a university, a school of public health, it's, the department chairs, the associate deans, hire the best and then get out of their way. Let them, and you got to be really careful not to micromanage. I think that's the real line that you have to walk. Allow the key the key hires to take ownership of what they do. That's really what we all want to do, right? We all want ownership. We want to feel a sense of responsibility. And if you have the best people, if you focus on excellence, let them take off. Let them do it and walk the line. It takes a lot of trust, but if you have the right people, the trust will be there. Of course, you sometimes make mistakes, right? And it's not the right person. And that's really very, very difficult. But as a leader, for me, it's it's choosing the right people and having trust in them, and then get out of their way and let them build and empower them.
If I could just also
Please.
add, those are really good points. I'm a recovering micromanager. I think I'm recovering. I hope to be. I tend to be, and so really pulling myself back, as you said, Ron, and letting people move forward, giving them the support that they need, clear metrics, checking in with them, but really trying to get out of their way. You said it really well. Another point I would make is you cannot peanut butter resources. So I was a dean, I had 11 departments, everybody wanted hires, right? And you need to be careful to allocate resources in a purposeful way. If you try to spread them equally, I find that's not the best way to move your mission and your vision forward. And that means you have difficult decisions. You have to tell people, I'm not going to give you the resources that you need. I found that as long as you can explain, this is what we're trying to do, this does not fit at this time into what we're trying to do, people usually respect that decision. But trying to make everybody happy, in my experience, does not work.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I'll also just say that one of the things that I struggle with is when you don't spread it evenly, and there are equity issues that come up. And one source of discontent, I think, if everyone's poor, everyone feels okay. If everyone's rich, everyone feels great. But if they're both rich and poor, that really is a source of tension. And I think as a leadership position, it's trying to balance that equity, which does make people feel happier, but also about what's the right thing to do and where do you put your limited resources. And it's a difficult line and path to navigate.
Yeah, I'm going to go slightly off script and just ask a follow-up question, which is, so you put a lot of emphasis on betting on the right people and knowing someone's the right person. How do you figure that out? How do you know someone's the right person? How do you, particularly if it's someone from another external person or,
Well, that's almost the unknowable. You trust your gut instinct. If it's an internal, you certainly have a lot of information about them, and if it's an external, data. That's what I do. I get data and I try to find out from people who other people that they worked with. And that often is if they are connected to people that that often can tell you a lot. So you try to get as much data as you can, and also people skills are really important in interviews and how they communicate. But understanding how they did in their previous positions and their relationships is really important. And then you don't, if you make a mistake, you did the best. You at least feel you did the best you can, and you don't beat yourself up over it. If you try to get all the data that you can, and you make the best decision from that.
I completely agree. Because I have such a wide swath, everything from humanities to wide swath of research, I really have to rely for internal and external people on experts in those scientific areas, in addition to collecting data, as Ron said. I also really try to look for values. I want, if the person comes to ASU, for them to fit into the culture that we have, which is one really of inclusive excellence. And they have to kind of fit into that. If that's not what they want to do, we have 150,000 undergraduate students at ASU. We are also an R1 research institution. So it's a certain type of culture. They won't be happy if they're not we're all going the same direction with that charter. Also, when they get to ASU, whether they're internal or external, I do everything I can to help them be successful. So recruiting for me, I'm sure for Ron as well, does not start when they've signed on the bottom line. I used to always tell people, I've hired you and you are going to succeed, or I'm going to die trying to make you succeed, because I will not admit error. But the key is, once they get to the place, you want to do everything you can to help them succeed. So for example, for assistant professors, more early career, we have training, everything to help people be as successful as possible, because their failure is not good for them, and it's certainly not good for the institution.
Great, thank you. So thank you to those who have submitted questions. I'm going to still take the moderator's sort of prerogative to ask two more, but if you want to, now is a good time to submit your questions into the Q&A. Okay, so what are you personally doing to ensure you continue to grow and develop as a leader? So brought up earlier, the fact that it requires a very different set of skills than one would need in sort of a narrow research career. So, or maybe not, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, you want to start?
Well, certainly there are, I've been to some leadership training courses and things, and that's always very helpful to reflect on what you're doing. And let me just say, there are different leadership styles, and they're all okay, right? There's not one style that fits all. And again, you play to your strengths. But if I were to say how I continue to grow as a leader, it's to listen. So I meet with faculty. I go to their offices, right? They don't come to my office, right? I go to their office, and I meet with students, and I think it's humility and empathy, and you try to understand what the other person is dealing with, what their issues are, and I think it's a lot of listening and just understanding different perspectives, and that's how I grow.
Great.
It's hard to kind of add to that. I love the saying humility. It is really being open to listening. I try to maintain an open culture so people feel comfortable speaking and saying, I disagree with that decision because of X, Y, and Z. I always say, if people are talking, you're not in trouble. When they stop talking, that's when you're in trouble. So you need to maintain that culture of trust and openness. And I hope I'm able to do that. It's hard sometimes because they're critical of what you're doing and they may not always understand all the constraints you're under, but you need to kind of be open, as Ron said, with humility to learning how you could do things better. I'm a big observer too. I watch people kind of in meetings. How are they working? What can I learn from those settings? You can read books. I think part of the thing is to be deliberate in continuing to learn and being open to criticism and trying to incorporate it. Ron spoke about formal training. You can also get a coach, for example, someone that can work with you on specific issues, but it is important to continue to learn and get better and try to implement what you've learned into your own leadership.
Great. Okay. And my last question before we switch over to the Q&A, open Q&A, is, in your view, what are some of the key open challenges in academia and higher education? I mean, Professor Brookmeyer referenced the COVID pandemic and all the, the changes that occurred there, and maybe, as folks are transitioning out of that.
Well,
Go ahead.
I guess for me, there's really two in thinking about these questions. The first is that I think we need to provide access at scale to excellent education, at least at some institutions. And where I am now, that is our focus. We're scaling excellence. As I said, we have 150,000 students, half of whom are online. Our same faculty teach the online students with the same curricula, and it's actually really exciting to talk to those students and see what they're doing. We need to build institutions like ASU. Otherwise, I think we're underutilizing talent across the nation that we need. Education doesn't have to all be a 4-year degree, and we have a whole entity at ASU, as many other places do, that focus on lifelong learning, working with community colleges, credentialing. I think we are wasting talent in this country. Half of the students that go to college do not complete. We need to figure out how to solve that problem. So to me, it's providing excellent education at scale. And the second is we have to do a better job in higher education, showing our relevance to society and our value. There's a lot going on in the press about higher education. We've got to better communicate what we're doing, why we matter, and the impact on society. The problems that we're facing, COVID, climate change, they are urgent. They are coming at us fast, and research universities need to be part of the solutions to those problems. And we need to convey what we're doing and better communicate with society about our value. So to me, it's about scale and access and conveying what it is we bring to society as research institutions. So
when I think about open challenge, I mean, there are a lot of open challenges in academia, but 3 come to my mind that I struggle with. The first is really a result of the pandemic, which is remote versus in person. We will never be the same after this pandemic. Classes have returned to in person right now, but there's a lot of pressure to have more classes remote. And where's the sweet spot? Faculty meetings, I would say most faculty meetings are now remote. Occasionally we try to bring people back to in person, we get pushback. Understanding the role of technology with regard to being remote in academia is really important. And I don't think the dust has fully settled. A lot of our staff are still working remotely. And I've got offices that are, I've got a space problem now, but I've got a really odd space problem because I have offices that are, I need space, but I've got offices that are empty because people are working remotely, but they're still in those offices. And how to optimize all of this and understand what has happened as a result of the pandemic. These are issues that are really challenging for all universities. The second thing that I think of as a challenge is funding for our faculty and our graduate students. I mean, NIH grants have gotten incredibly competitive. And funding for graduate students, training grants are hard to get. I mentioned the strike that the UC system has just gotten through, and developing multi-year packages for graduate students and helping them build careers. That's a real big challenge. And the third one is diversity. Diversity of our students and our faculty and our staff. While we're making progress in diversity of our students, when I look at our faculty, we have a lot more work to do, and I struggle with that for how we can create more diverse faculty and that look like our student body.
Great, thank you. So, okay, so we have a fair amount of questions coming in. I may hop around a little bit, and you don't feel obligated, both of you, you both welcome to answer, but you may or may not have comments on everything. Okay, I'm going to start kind of in the middle. So, from Offer Harrell at UConn, how do you think that the statistical associations can support more statisticians getting into leadership positions? Is there something that the statistical societies can be doing to help other folks advance into positions like yours? Or is that something they should be doing? Or do you have thoughts about that?
Well, I would just say you're doing it, right? And so my thanks to the National Institute of Statistical Sciences and COPSS. You are doing, these are things that bring people together, and showing statisticians in leadership positions. That really helps others who may aspire to it or hadn't even really thought about it. That there are different roadmaps that you can take in your career, and also it doesn't have to be a linear path that you follow. So I think that's one way, these kinds of webinars, and I think the other is as statisticians to recognize that their ability as a collaborator, working with people, that's really a valued skill, and not everyone can do that, and so as a statistician, you particularly in collaboration and bringing people together and communicating about different issues and working across departmental and disciplinary lines, those are really important skills and do translate into becoming a leader.
Yeah, I would agree. Picking up on that last point, Ron, it's really widening the aperture, as it were, as what is a statistician, both within our community and more broadly. I think the ASA is also, and including other statistical associations, have taken a lead on nominating statisticians for positions. I don't mean for jobs like dean of a school or something that would be inappropriate, but for national committees in certain areas. And I think that's really, really important to show statisticians as leaders on the national stage as well, besides in particular sectors. I think bringing together of the community, as Ron said, and it's not just those that are coming up aspiring to be leaders, but those of us who may be more advanced in our careers in terms of leadership. I get asked a lot, here's a dean position that's open. Do you have candidates? So the more all of us can advocate for the profession as well, which is what events like this do, I think the more we'll be able to move statisticians forward. And I totally agree with Ron. I think statisticians are ideally suited for these types of roles. We're very good, as Ron said, at listening. We're good with numbers, which is half my job, spreadsheets, figuring out where things are, good at bringing people together. And so the more, I think statisticians have a lot to contribute in these roles.
Great, thank you. So next question I'll read. So from Muzaffar Ali Baig from University of Chitral, Pakistan. So the question is about what roles they play to impact early career researchers in statistics, with a focus on from early career researchers from developing countries to become leaders. So I guess, providing that support both to the early career researchers within your institution and also from with a focus on folks from developing countries. If not, no. We can bounce around a little bit too. Okay. So from Jamie Spicer at Wake Forest School of Medicine, what are some common mistakes that leaders make when they transition from a faculty role to a leadership role? And how can these be avoided? So really with the focus on that transition from sort of a faculty only position to a leadership role, and what to avoid doing.
Well, I think, Ron, you've had the more standard role. I have some ideas, but I never actually transitioned from a faculty member to leadership. I've observed it. Maybe you want to start and I could add.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think as a faculty member, you're very focused on your own research. You're very focused on your own department. And when you become a leader of a larger organization, you really need to think beyond your department and your own research. It's really about building up everyone else, and also you do have to be aware of your own disciplinary roots, and you have to also make sure that you're not moving in one direction or another because of from where you came from, whether it be statistics or the Department of Biostatistics or something. And you need to bring people together under one roof, and it's about culture. It comes back to what a leader can do is create a culture where everyone thrives, and that is a key where everyone feels good and everyone's feels like they're contributing to the whole. Everyone's part of the same team. And so as a faculty member, much of what we do, particularly as statisticians, we're working on maybe whether it's our own methodological research or working on a particular consulting problem. But as a leader of an organization, you need to stretch and bring people together under the roof and feel like we're all in it together, and everyone has different strengths. I think that's the other thing, is to acknowledge that it's not a one size fits all, that every faculty member has a different strength and they're all bringing something to the table, and that you respect what they do, whether it's this kind of research or that kind, or they're excellent teachers or they're excellent researchers or they're excellent in service. It all counts, and they're all contributing and making people feel good and recognize the contributions that they're making.
Yeah, those are really good. I would just add 2 points. One is, I think it's really important to remember staff in the whole equation as well. And I know you didn't mean to exclude them, Ron, by any means, because I know you as a leader and everything you've been saying. But sometimes in academia, and this was surprising to me because I came from outside academia, there's this very hierarchical, tenured, and then the research faculty, and then the teaching, and then the staff at the very bottom. Everybody, as Ron said, is part of the success. Everybody has something to give. So remember the staff. They are the lowest paid. They are often not remembered in the equation, but they are key to driving the institution forward. So that's one thing. I think another challenge, particularly if you move into leadership internally, you're a faculty member, you become the chair of the department. Again, I have always come from the outside, is you have friends in the department. There's someone who started as an assistant professor when you did. And you've got to be really careful when you're the leader that you don't actually or are perceived as favoring one group of people or individuals. And it's actually quite difficult. And common mistakes I see are people really trying to overcompensate for that, which is problematic, or going the other way and really favoring their area. I'll give you an example. When I became dean, it's, you're a statistician and everybody thinks you're going to favor statistics. But it was clear in my college that moving data science forward was important. And how do you balance to not be seen as, I've come in as a statistician, we're just going to focus on statistics and data science, while at the same time making clear that this was an important area for the entire college to move forward. So that's a kind of balancing act that you have to take on as a leader. And I totally agree with Ron. I've said this in other settings. When I was moving forward to being a leader, I asked someone that I really admired how to be a good leader. And she said, always think one level above where you are. So my job at ASU is to lead knowledge enterprise. But what I need to always think about is one level above, which at the point where I am now is the entire university. Make the decision that's best for the entire university. Or if you're a chair, what decision will best serve the School of Public Health, rather than just my department. If you always think one level above, you usually make the right decisions. They may not be the best decision for your particular unit, but they will be the long-term best decision, I think.
Great. So thanks to folks for contributing these great questions. We're not going to be able to get through all of them, but I will select one more, and then I have a wrap-up question for us after. So from Richard Montes at Alanalam. So Dr. Morton mentioned in her intro slides about knowing when she has done what she can at a job and it is time to move on. Can she share what are the metrics she uses to come to that conclusion? It's a nice question.
It's a great question. And I should say at the outset that some people disagree with me about this. So usually when I go into a job, I try to match myself to jobs where I think I can actually contribute in a certain way, trying to accomplish a certain set of outcomes. And when I feel that I have accomplished those, that's when I think it's time to move on. Another way that I think about it is, am I really the best person to bring the college, for example, or department to the next level? I see certain strengths in myself as a leader, and I often feel it's time for a different type of leadership. So I'll try to give you an example. I'm pretty good at operationalizing things and kind of getting structure and processes moving forward. I don't think I'm the best leader to make kind of technological, scientific pushes in a certain direction. I'm also not a great startup leader of initiatives. That takes a certain type of strengths. So sometimes when I've reached a point where I felt like I've done what I came to do, and now it's time for someone else that has a set of skills that I don't have, that's when it's time to go. I haven't been precise. The question asked for metrics, and I really haven't answered that question. So I apologize for that. You do have to be careful that you're not seen as constantly hopping from job to job. And I have moved through 5 jobs in my career, 5 different institutions, but I've just felt like it was time. I've done what I've come to do, and someone else better than me can take the unit, whatever it is, to the next level. And to be terribly honest, I get a little bored. Probably shouldn't admit that. I try not to admit that in job interviews, but I like kind of the excitement of learning new things, trying new things. And when I feel like that excitement isn't there anymore, I try something different. That's the selfish side of the decision making. I don't know, Ron, how you feel about this question, whether you share.
well,
Some
what I
people
would
don't
say,
share my opinion.
I was thinking about metrics, and the only metric I could come up with is how do you feel about getting up in the morning? And if you feel pretty good and excited and you jump out of bed, that's a good sign, right? But if you're like, this is like, I don't think I can do this. It's that excitement. It's like, what do you want to do? If you feel you can make a contribution and you're excited and you really feel like you can make a difference, that's good, right? Then you still got some mileage. But if you feel, you get up in the morning, you feel like, I think I did this, not sure I want to take on something new, then maybe it's time.
Yes, and I'll just add one point. I think it's really important when you leave a role that there not be a ripple. You leave and the unit keeps going along, doing great. There's not a ripple. It's not like Sally left, the sky is falling. Not that people would say that, but so it's important as a leader to develop the next generation. Succession planning is really important, I think.
I think that's great. I mean, I think you want to leave the organization in a better place than when you came. And the best way to do that is to prepare the next generation of leaders to come in and take over and carry on, or what you've done, or actually move in a different direction, because different times call for different kinds of leaders.
Great. Well, I think that's a lovely place to stop. So thank you so much to our two panelists. Thank you to the audience for listening. Special thank you to COPSS-NISS, to Amita Manatunga and Jim Rosenberger. If you found this conversation to be helpful, it's a recording. We're going to post it on the web. Please share it with your colleagues. You can also tweet about it with the hashtag Stats Leadership Webinar. So thank you so much, and look forward to more of these in the Leadership Webinar series to come. So thanks, everyone.